Hi there. On the 22nd of August 1967, freedom fighters of the Luthuli Detachment were camped on the edges of the Wankie Game Reserve. In the distance, they spotted a patrol of the Rhodesian African Rifles. The Rhodesians, through a loudspeaker, ordered the guerillas to surrender. In response, the guerillas opened a volley of machine gun fire. The exchange of fire went on for the rest of the afternoon. While the freedom fighters lost 4 of their comrades, the Rhodesia African Rifles lost a lieutenant, a sergeant major, and a warrant officer, as well as 12 ordinary soldiers. With its commanders lost, the patrol was forced to withdraw. The joint leader of the Luthuli Detachment was one Chris Hani. 22 August 1967 was a turning point, for it marks the first time Umkhonto weSizwe, the MK, the military wing of the African National Congress, started military operations against forces of the white minority regimes in Southern Africa. For Chris Hani, this was the beginning of his career as a freedom fighter and a guerrilla leader. He never lived to experience the freedom he spent most of his adult life fighting for. He was assassinated on the 10th of April 1993. To most people who aspired for freedom and attaining majority rule, Chris Hani was incorruptible, a hero for millions of youth in the townships, a force of resistance, and one of the struggle's most outstanding figures. Nelson Mandela referred to Chris Hani as one of the greatest freedom fighters South Africa has ever known. In fact, Hani was second only to Nelson Mandela himself in popularity among black South Africans. However, despite the depiction of Chris Hani as a heroic figure and as a model of emulation during the anti-apartheid struggle, a segment of the South African population regarded him as a hardliner and even someone to be feared. Join me in this installment of Afro Perspectives as we explore the life and career of Chris Hani. Martin Tembisile Hani, popularly known as Chris Hani, was born on the 28th of June 1942-44 in the rural village of Sebalele in the region of Komfibaba in the Transkei. He was the fifth of 6 children of Gilbert and Nomaiso Hani, and one of the 3 that did not die during infancy. His father Gilbert lived in the bachelor's quarters in Cape Town and was considered a migrant worker. Gilbert was active in the ANC and served as chairman of the Langa Vigilantes Association. In 1962, he was banished from Cape Town to the Transkei, but left South Africa and sought asylum in Lesotho. A further influence was Hani's uncle Milton Hani, who lived in the Kayamandi location in Stellenbosch. He was a member of the Communist Party of South Africa, the forerunner to the South African Communist Party, SACP. Chris Hani attended the Catholic school at Zigudu. The Catholics influenced his earlier decision to join the priesthood. When his father Gilbert got wind of this, he urged young Chris to transfer to Matanzima Secondary School in Kala from 1954 to 1956. He later enrolled at the Lovedale Institute in the town of Alice in Eastern Cape. In 1958, Chris Hani sat for the Cape Senior Certificate at Lovedale with English, Xhosa, History, Mathematics and Hygiene as his final subjects. Even at this early stage in his life, the brutality of the apartheid system was shaping his destiny. Chris could not apply to the prestigious liberal colleges of the University of the Witwatersrand and the University of Cape Town. The Extension of University Education Act of 1959 put that option out of Chris Hani's reach. The only option left was Fort Hare University, where he was offered a place in February of 1959. In 1959, whilst at Fort Hare, Chris Hani participated in protests against the takeover of the university by the Department of Bantu Education. Then, in 1961, Chris Hani was suspended from Fort Hare for his role in the campaign against the exclusion of blacks from voting in the referendum on turning South Africa into a republic. By April of 1962, Chris Hani completed his studies and was awarded a Bachelor of Arts degree in Latin and English. He had to attend the graduation ceremony at Rhodes University in Grahamstown, now known as Makanda. To Chris Hani's dismay, his parents Gilbert and Nomaiso were banned from attending the ceremony. It was one of the absurdities of apartheid that while Chris could attend his graduation ceremony at Rhodes University, in what was considered a white part of town, it was a no-go area for blacks, and his parents were barred. After university, Chris secured a position as a trainee lawyer with the legal firm of Schaefer and Schaefer based in Cape Town. Due to the demands of his underground political work, he never completed his training. A few months after arriving in Cape Town, Chris Hani was stopped at a roadblock and found with pamphlets attacking the government's proposed 90-day detention legislation. Hani was detained at the Philippi police station, then at Roland Street Prison, and charged under the Suppression of Communism Act. He was released on a bail of 500 rands. Whilst on bail, in October 1962, Chris Hani attended the ANC conference at Lobatse in Botswana, where representatives of the external and internal wings of the organization met. On his return to South Africa, Chris Hani was arrested at the Lobatse border post by the South African police and was detained at Zeerust. He was tried and then sentenced to 18 months imprisonment under the Suppression of Communism Act, but was again released on bail pending appeal. In the early months of 1963, Hani lost his appeal and he decided to go underground. In May of 1963, Chris Hani received instructions from Governor Mbeki to proceed to Johannesburg, where he was instructed to leave South Africa and undergo military training in the Soviet Union. He traveled via Tanzania to the Soviet Union. While back in 1964, he was now back in Tanzania along with dozens of other young MK soldiers. In 1965, South Africa, which was then still surrounded by a buffer states of white-ruled states, there was no direct route into South Africa. In 1967, owing to his academic background and grasp of guerrilla warfare, Hani was appointed political commissar of the Luthuli Detachment. This was a unit specifically formed by the MK to prepare for military operations. He was sent into southern Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, to fight alongside military cadres of the Zimbabwe African People's Union, ZAPU. The Luthuli Detachment crossed the Zambezi River into western Rhodesia on the 31st of July 1967. They fought the Rhodesians on the 22nd of August 1967 and on two more subsequent encounters. Although Chris Hani and the Luthuli Detachment inflicted heavy losses on the Rhodesian African Rifles, they were no match for the enemy, who had air support from the South Africans. Outnumbered and running out of ammunition and with no route to withdraw into Zambia, Chris Hani ended up crossing into Botswana at the end of 1967. Botswana, recently granted its own independence, feared reprisals from the apartheid forces in South Africa. It was coerced into arresting members of the Luthuli Detachment, and Hani was charged with possession of weapons of war, and sentenced to 6 years imprisonment. He only served 2 years and then released on parole. He then made his way back into Zambia in December of 1968. Once back in Lusaka, Chris Hani, as commissar of the Luthuli Detachment, he requested to discuss the failings of the Wankie campaign with ANC Secretary General Duma Nokwe. In turn, Nokwe asked Hani to put the grievances in writing. This resulted in a lengthy memorandum signed by Chris Hani and 6 others, 2 of whom had been with Hani on the Wankie operation. It described the ANC in exile as being in a deep crisis. The memorandum attacked the ANC leadership, who were more focused on attending conferences rather than fighting the apartheid security forces. Chris Hani attacked corruption in the top leadership of the ANC. The grievances specifically mentioned Joe Modise and the MK chief and accused him of running it as if it was his own personal fiefdom, with no input from the ANC leadership. However, once the grievances outlined in the memorandum became public knowledge, the 7 signatories, including Chris Hani himself, were detained on accusations of treason. There was a faction within the ANC leadership that pushed for Hani and his comrades to be shot. Only the intervention of President Oliver Tambo saved Hani and his comrades. Instead, Chris Hani was suspended from his membership of both the ANC and the MK. Despite the backlash from the memorandum, in early 1970, at the age of 27, Chris Hani was appointed to the Central Committee of the ANC. Hani's appointment to the ANC Central Committee signaled his rehabilitation. In 1974, Chris Hani was instructed to set up his base of operations in Maseru, Lesotho. His brief was to establish a political infrastructure for the ANC in the Western Cape and to plan sabotage operations. While in Lesotho, Chris Hani was now a prominent figure and was the target of assassination attempts by the South African security police. In June 1980, there was an assassination attempt on Hani as he was driving home after visiting new arrivals from South Africa. Then in September of the same year, his driver and car disappeared. To the South Africans, Chris Hani was public enemy number 1. In 1981, shots were again fired at him, but he escaped unharmed. However, some of the attempts to assassinate Hani were amateurish. On 2 August 1981, Ernest Ramatolo, a citizen of Lesotho, ended up blowing himself using the bomb intended for Chris Hani. In 1981, a second attempt was made on Hani's life when explosives were placed in the car he was using. Due to the frequency of assassination attempts, it was no longer safe for Chris Hani to operate out of Maseru. In October 1992, the ANC leadership decided to withdraw Hani to Lusaka, and just 2 months later, a South African Defence Force raid on Maseru killed 42 people. Although Chris Hani had already left Lesotho, the SADF went on to raid an empty flat. Upon his recall to Zambia in 1982, Hani was appointed political commissar and deputy commander of the Umkhonto weSizwe. In early 1983, the ANC deployed its cadres to fight alongside the MPLA troops in defense of the province of Malanje against UNITA and the South African Army. This was an unpopular deployment, and the rank and file of the Umkhonto weSizwe mutinied. They demanded that they should be deployed to fight inside of South Africa itself. On 12 January 1984, Chris Hani negotiated with the mutineers and eventually persuaded them to lay down their arms. Most of the mutineers were detained without a trial. Chris Hani lobbied with the National Executive Committee of the ANC for their release. In November 1987, Hani was appointed Chief of Staff of Umkhonto weSizwe, taking over from Joe Slovo, who was suffering from poor health. On the 2nd of February 1990, FW de Klerk, the South African president, announced the unbanning of all political organizations in South Africa, including the ANC and the SACP. He announced the unconditional release of Nelson Mandela from prison and also announced that all those in exile were free to return to South Africa and would not be prosecuted. Chris Hani was among the last of the ANC hierarchy to return to South Africa in August of 1990. He received his guarantees of indemnity very late. As leader of the Umkhonto weSizwe, Chris Hani had agreed to the ANC suspending the armed struggle. However, sections of the conservative Afrikaans press labeled him a hardliner who was prepared to return to the armed struggle at any moment. He was even falsely accused of having an army on standby in neighboring Zimbabwe. However, on a visit to the United States on the 24th of April 1991, Chris Hani reassured the Americans that the ANC was committed to negotiations and the transition to majority rule. Despite efforts to tarnish Hani's image in the right-wing press, in December 1991, Chris Hani was elected Secretary General of the South African Communist Party. In a sign of his commitment to change, in March 1992, Hani stepped down from his post as Chief of Staff of the Umkhonto weSizwe to concentrate on his work as SAP Secretary General. At the ANC Congress held in Durban in July of 1991, Chris Hani was re-elected to the National Executive Committee, receiving the highest number of votes of all the candidates. After Mandela, he was the most popular politician in all of South Africa. In August 1992, with a breakdown in negotiations, Chris Hani led the march from King Williamstown to Bisho in the Ciskei. He led a similar march in September 1992 when Ciskei forces fired on demonstrators, killing over 20 people. On the 10th of April 1993, Chris Hani, while he was out buying a newspaper, he was shot at 3 times in the head. He died on the spot. The assassin was Janusz Walusz and belonged to the far-right wing organization AWB. The AWB was opposed to negotiations and it accused the National Party of government of FW de Klerk of selling out to the ANC. Although the assassination of Chris Hani was aimed at derailing the negotiations, it had the opposite effect. After Chris Hani's murder, the National Party government lost the upper hand and the ANC successfully used the moment to press for an election date and the installation of a transitional executive council to run the country until democratic elections could be held. The death of Chris Hani robbed South Africa and the wider world of a true revolutionary. With it, the dream of a more just South Africa came to an end. Although his death was the work of an assassin, it signaled the triumph of the liberal wing of the ANC with its commitment to putting the interests of big business at the expense of the welfare of the ordinary black South African. Thank you for tuning in. If you have anything to say on the life of Chris Hani, please drop your comments in the box below. And please give me some likes and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. Bye.